Jibundi the Tumo Laji Ribo, what the Mandrun Mother, what the Mandrushana, Jibundi the Tumo Laji Ribatele, and then Beijina Nieja, Lui, Ulia, Tins Mobatel Dua, each Kosultan Gudua, Jibundi Winnet.
So we're currently in the section on Lama Tsongkhapa's text, The Great Treatise on the Stage of the Path to Enlightenment, on the stage of the path that are shared in common with beings of medium capacity. So we're currently on page 207 in the Tibetan, so I'm just going to find exactly where that is with the English.
This one.
The low.
Pay the teacher Jibundi, Tumo Laji Rimba Lujan La Je, Sambajan Modan, Tejibit, Tela Ludu Sewa, Taba Dribi, Laji Rejetan the Povas, what the Nindronamada.
Okay, so we'll begin on page 267 in the English, and this is the real or actual stages of the path shared in common with beings of medium capacity. So we find here there are four, it says 3 parts here, but there's actually a 4th section that we have. So there are 4 categories when we look at Lama Tsongkhapa's outline on this section. So we first have the category of the mental training, and then the second category, which is the measure of the determination to be free. Third category, dispelling misconceptions. And then the 4th category is ascertaining the path leading to liberation. So these are the 4 categories in the outline that Lama Tsongkhapa puts forth himself.
That's how you did the Sambajan said to the Nanjuk Sambajan.
That's
Nanjuk Sambajan, the Sambajan was Sambajan.
That's
Quid Nelling about you and Nanjuk Sambajan, somebody Jibit. Nanjuk Sambaji said this was now, Nisan going to Taba Dunelo, Shona Tessan which about to say zero. And the Tela Lotu Savas would calling about you and I knew somebody and Nitugian lady, Shanju Samazu, the Nelson Lagomundusa, Jig, to what you said Lotuji. What Lotusa would tell and what Lotusa was. Tajaba Tabat de Village and Tela Povatilta, go down the London in Samarba. Yeah.
So in looking at the 4 parts of the outline, the first category, the mental training, is specifically referring to the mental training of renunciation, or the mind that aspires to be free. So that is the first category. And the second category is the measure of the determination to be free, or the measure of the renunciation. So how does one know that there is renunciation there? What qualifies that? And we find in Lama Tsongkhapa's other text, the short poem called The 3 Principal Paths, or 3 Principal Aspects of the Path, where it says, by constant meditation your mind will not entertain a moment's wish even for the successes of this life, and you will aim for freedom all day and night. Then you experience transcendent renunciation. So this is the measure. If someone were to say, posit the fully realized determination to be free. So if someone were to say, posit that, you would then say someone who aims for freedom all day and night. So this is how you would know that there is transcendent renunciation, or there is renunciation present. So this is the measure. And then the next category is dispelling misconceptions. And here this is related to the misconceptions that arise that some posit that the renunciation, or the practice of renunciation, or the determination to be free, is only for those hearer practitioners, and that is not actually a practice of the Bodhisattva. So Lama Tsongkhapa negates this misconception related to renunciation and the practice of it. And then the fourth category, which is ascertaining the path leading to liberation, we find the two categories of the last two noble truths, the truth of cessation and the truth of path. So the presentation on the truth of cessation and the truth of path. Dixon.
다 동부 선바정원들 사진이도 동부를 니래 안에 타바드니 줄롱어종화다 대집이 타니 동부 선바정원들 사진이도
Leso.
다 동부한테 타바드니 줄롱어종화서 들어오대 사진지로
Leso.
네 자제부들 사진 송지도다 타바고종화 타바드니 줄롱어종화 타바 runduwa pongwas saji song jin telma de shi je gdwa wat ka song ga chin sa ba de digo je de ta ni ba de je bi taus de ne man ro da mar ba ni ba de je bi to ne de na ta ba de ni je bi to la ni je na ta ba de ni je bi to la ni do de da kun yu gun na sang ba da den de la jun ni gun na sang ba wo ta nga su kan wa de ne man ro da mar
Leso. Then when we look at the category of the first category of Lama Tsongkhapa's outline, mental training, there are two categories underneath that: identifying the mind intent on liberation, and then the second category, the method for developing the mind intent on liberation, or the mind of renunciation. So identifying the mind of renunciation and the method for developing the mind of renunciation is another way to translate it, but it would be looser than intent on liberation. So then this first category, identifying the mind intent on liberation, Lama Tsongkhapa only presents one category. When we look at Jayan Sheba's outline, there are three categories. First, actual liberation. Second category, the mind seeking it. And then the third category of what is abandoned. This is, again, from Jayan Sheba's commentary on the great treatise on the stage of the path to enlightenment. So then we've gone through that section already with those three categories and so forth. So then we move on to the method for developing the mind intent on liberation. In that category, the method for developing the mind intent on liberation, we find two categories presented by Lama Tsongkhapa: reflecting on suffering and its origin, and then reflection from the viewpoint of the 12 dependent arisings, or the 12 links of dependent origination. So in English, then, that goes, the method is on page 268.
This one.
Dixon.
Yeah. What about what the doing the Kunyu Samba, not in the Yala Junior Samba Nije, Tombula Nies, doing the Kunyu Samba de la Done de Toma Done Kui Yemi down, Kunyu Kui, Jurin Samba Nies, Redua, Done Yemi. Dune kui nyeme samba, dune de kui nyeme samba.
Leso.
Jukunju kui jorin sambas. Dune nyeme sala mabe na taba dune jijin me jishin de zuren dua. Kunju kui jorin masana kui tawa jusi me shibe silingan jusi temba tang kwa kanki jiba shiba jis langli dune lo du sopa du sha isa marbe. Dune kui nyeme samba tang Kunyu kuyu jorin samba, dode nyemi san lama be na taba dun jijime jishins. Dunga debi nyemi du masan na taba dun yabu yung mares. kunyu kuyu jorin de masana no kuyu tsawa de karima nguchu ma jutu ma res silinga juji temba da ko kangi jeba shibaje what doesn't do on zamarba
That's so.
yeah.
So then the first category, reflection on suffering and its origin, it says this is explained in two parts. Reflection on the truth of suffering, the faults of cyclic existence, and reflection on the process of cyclic existence in terms of its origin. Why is it necessary to do this, or reflect on the true sufferings and true origins? We find the reason for this in Lama Tsongkhapa's smaller Lamrim called the abbreviated stages of the path, or the Lamrim Dudan, where it says, if you do not make an effort to think about true sufferings and their drawbacks, you will not properly develop a keen interest to work for liberation. If you do not consider the stages whereby true origins of all suffering place and keep you in cyclic existence, you will not know the means for cutting the root of this vicious circle. Therefore, you should cherish exuding total disgust and renunciation of such existence while knowing which factors bind you to its wheel. I, the yogi, have practiced just that. If you would also seek liberation, please cultivate yourself in the same way. So why is it necessary to reflect on the truth of suffering? It's necessary to reflect on the truth of suffering because if you don't consider if it says if you do not think about true sufferings and their drawbacks, you won't properly develop a keen interest to work for liberation. So that's why you would reflect on the truth of suffering. And then why would you reflect on the process of cyclic existence in terms of its origin? If you do not consider the stages whereby true origins of all suffering place and keep you in cyclic existence, you will not know the means for cutting the root of this vicious circle. So we find in Lama Tsongkhapa's poem the reasons for these points in the outline of reflection.
도데 공부 공부서 사진이 지고도 사진이 지난 담바제데 콜쿠 준데니 콜쿠 트이 준데니 이제들 담바질로도 말고 콜쿠 조군주 담바 데부동에 담바 콜 트이 줄란데 데부고데 대제들 밥이 담바제서다 what 말고
so then reflection on the truth of suffering, so reading forward in the Lamrim Chenmo, reflection on the truth of suffering, the faults of cyclic existence. Reflection on the truth of suffering is explained in terms of, and then we find two categories. First, showing the significance of the Buddhas asserting the truth of suffering as the first of the Four Noble Truths, of the Four Truths. And then second, the actual meditation on suffering. So when we look at the four superior truths, we find that there are two truths that show how one is bound to cyclic existence, and then two truths that show how one is freed from cyclic existence. And we find a cause and effect relationship that those truths have with one another. So when we look at how one is bound to cyclic existence, we find that the first superior truth, the truth of suffering, and then the second superior truth, the truth of origin. The truth of origin being the cause of the truth of suffering. So here we see that cause and effect relationship, the suffering being the result or effect, and then the origin being the cause. And then looking at the third and fourth noble truth, the truth of cessation and the truth of path, we again find that relationship there where the pathway is what causes the truth of cessation. So we would see that relationship there, and that relationship is how one would be freed from cyclic existence, or unbound literally from cyclic existence.
다 담바제들 밥이 담바질라고도와 밥이 담바져서 밥아선 가르 밥이 담바선 가르서 그래서 밥아서나 dene yetu tonglang gonglang mulula raje tonglang gonglang mulula shasan tonglang gonglang mulula wa tusul nebi kaza tusul paba la umar paba susu ju sal paba 소소주 살리 파베 너한테 강사 두술 파바스 대바제도 파비 덴바스 네 파바 쪽에 대바제도 무슨도 버레스 파바 쪽에 대중 무슨도 비모로 덴베나 파비 덴바스 파비 덴바 동네 덴바 파비 무슨도 버들 덴바레스 군요 덴바 파비 무슨도 버레 또 버터 덴바레스 고덴달라데 what to call papi ngosum to be more dembena dembas papi dembas what is the things amarwa
Then tonlang gomang melang.
papa se ta papa se karasana papa da susu kanza de ma de na papa da susu jo ni de marwa phala ma to kendel susu jo Lama to ba susu jo de dos susu jo kanse na papi jo ma to ba Lama to ba susu jo phala ma to kanza de susu jo la res kundile sanga marwa susu jo kanse na papi jo ma to ba phala ma to ba ja res papa to what the name of it
Tonlam gomam melang.
yeah
Okay. So these four truths are called the four superior truths or four Arya truths. Why are they called four Arya truths or four superior truths? So then we have to look at what an Arya is or what a superior is. So there are two categories of beings. There are ordinary beings and then there are superior beings or Arya beings. And Arya beings are any of those beings on the at a hearer's of the hearer vehicle, the solitary realizer vehicle, or the bodhisattva vehicle, and those are also Shravaka Prachika Buddha and bodhisattva vehicle. So practitioners of those vehicles who have achieved the path of seeing, meditation, or no more learning. So those superior beings or Aryas have had a direct realization of the Four Noble Truths. So therefore, because those Four Noble Truths are directly realized by a superior, they are called the Four Arya Truths or the Four Superior Truths. So that's the reason why they aren't just called the Four Truths, they're called Four Superior Truths. Because they're realized directly through direct valid cognition by a superior, by an Arya being. And again, an Arya being is a being who's, as a note, there's 5 paths: path of accumulation, path of preparation, path of seeing, meditation, and no more learning. Arya starts at the path of seeing. So any of those beings of hearer, solitary, realizer, bodhisattva, who are on the path of seeing, meditation, or no more learning. So those types of beings have directly seen these four truths, have directly seen the true paths and true cessations. Therefore, these paths and cessations are necessarily true because they've been realized directly by an Arya. And this is why we say true paths and true true paths and true cessations, or we say true sufferings and true origins. They are necessarily truth because they've been realized directly by a superior, and therefore they are four superior truths. So that's the explanation of why they are named these four Arya truths.
Whatanga to what the Shero Nibin Theatre, Gata, Parangata, Parasangata, Buddhist was Theatre Gata, Solonjula Marva, Solonjula, Suzu Saji, Parangata, Parasangata, Buddhist or Lason de Papillon Marva, Papillon, Parangate, Parasangate, Buddhist or Buddhist, and Tolan, Golan, Marulan, Julia, Caron Julia, Kazat la Papas, Papas, what things are Marva.
So this is what differentiates superiors from ordinary beings. And we find in a Sangha's text in the Guntu, I think it's the compendium of, I'll look it up, the compendium of trainings, I believe. I'll look it up though. in Asanga's text, it states that ordinary beings, the Guntu, the Longyang.
수수주 강신나스 수수주 간다샤고스나 타비추마토보 달라마토볼자고.
So what is, in Asanga's text it says, what is an ordinary being? An ordinary being is one who has not a superior, has not realized an Arya path, a superior path. So an ordinary being has not realized a superior path, and this is what differentiates one from the other. So in the Sutra of the Heart of Transcendent Knowledge, there is a mantra, Teata Om Gate Gate Paragate Parasangati Bodhisoha. And this implicitly is referring to those 5 paths that we're speaking of. So the first Gate is referring to the path of accumulation. It says Teata Om Gate. And then it says Teata Om Gate Gate. The second Gate is referring to the path of preparation. So these 2 paths are paths of ordinary beings, beings who have whose continuums are not continuums of a superior. So these are the first 2 gates, path of accumulation and path of preparation. Then paragate is referring to the path of seeing. This is the first superior path, and this is where when one becomes an Arya, one becomes a superior, when he or she achieves this path of seeing, paragate. Parasamgate is referring to the path of meditation, which is also a superior path, an Arya path. And Bodhisoha is referring to the path of no more learning. And this is a superior or Arya path. So this is how we differentiate superior beings from ordinary beings, and we find those 5 paths implicitly in the Sutra of the Heart of Transcendent Knowledge, and then also that explanation presented in Asanga's text in the going to. Oh, the Abhidharma Samukkaya. Compendium of Knowledge. In the Compendium of Knowledge.
Abhidharma Lama Toba Susi Jun de Dosa. Palama Toba de la Susi Jagres. De Basubanduru.
And in Basubandhu's Abhidharma Kosha, we find a quote that says, ordinary beings are those beings who have not achieved the superior paths. So we find that also in the Abhidharma Kosha, the Treasury of Knowledge by Vasubandhu. And then the text by Asanga is the Compendium of Knowledge, the Abhidharma Samuccaya.
What the Deba Jidal doing, Deba Gunu, Deba Goden Landes, John Chita, and doing Deba Gunu Deba, Landen Godens, John Kani, Udo Kani. And then Gunu Deba, doing Deba Sana, Gunu Deba Juro, doing Deba Jebro, Gunu Deba Heluson, Gunu Deba Jebu, doing Deba Nibalson. And Landen Jo Goden Jo Landen son balson, and then Goden Jebalson Age, Corrigido, the Jundi Tenjimbains, Jundi Corrindes, Doget about the Kunju de Devro. Goden the Landen Trendilla or Debunga the Mother, Train Debulagra, Debula Juri Gunena, what the Juri Gune, Debu. Jebishi Jebasan Ramatun Jebugunemar, Guden Tabarwa. What Debaji Kurin to what the Judy Dejiri Kurinchi, and then what the Karsogorel, not to Julachi Rimbas, not to Julachi Ribatelo, what the Bangel Son, Kunu de Bani Bache, Goden Sombalson, and the Latin de Jebal Swat, Modu Jula Jimbares, Nyalenji, Nechibu, Nemet was Jermichi, Nyaleg Ness, Lan House of Levin, Nyaleg, Chane, Daji Grimba de Water, Dungan Thomas Water is Ulmaleg Dua.
The Tambo, the Juje, then the Lamson Kappa Kalen, the Nyalan, Jutsen.
La Nyalang Rimbu, Sina, Dungan de Bukurin, Dungan Demba, Neba Kuju Deba, Somba Guden, Jebalan Deres, Nyalang Nature Uldua, Nature Waters, things was on, and Junil Kudu Sombares, Kojibane. Daji Grimba to what Judy Tunji Rimbares, Modu Kaji because Judan Lanta, Doganta, Gubala and Corrigis, Judan Lanta, Jukuju de Bancaluson, and Lande de Nebason, Dogan de Bason Bache, and then what the Lande de Jebalson Goden. Judan Lanta, Doganta. Gobalan Goba Jeba Rendua.
Then the Kajepa.
Moduji Kojibal Tere. Moduji Koton because Drudan de Banatans. Drudansana, Demba Nimarver. Truth. Demba Natas, she because of Poneva Truth Mare. What he goes Rimba de Lanya Langas and be wanted Jebatan de Dungan de Bangolus, Deba Niba, and then Goden Somba. London Jibal Jat what things are it.
Then he cop Jepa, the Jew, Lan Dunyo Goden.
Jibal Tajudi going to China, then you can embarrass. Tanda de Cotombi goes to the embarrassment because of Zimbabwe. Lanya Lenges on the Zimbabwe, Dagmares on the
So there is a cause and effect relationship that we find with the first two truths and the second two truths. So the truth of suffering, the superior truth of suffering is caused by the superior truth of origin. So the cause of suffering is the origin. So is what origin is referring to. So this is that first relationship, the truth of origin bringing about suffering, causing suffering. Now, the truth of cessation and path, we can say there's a cause and effect relationship, but it isn't really an effect. It's similar to an effect. It is a dependently origination, but we cannot say that it is a real cause and effect relationship because cessation is permanent. Liberation is permanent. Therefore, it can't be a result because it's not. It is static. It's not something that can be caused. So we say that there's a facsimile of a cause and effect relationship there, and an interdependence that brings about this state of cessation, this state of liberation. But it's not an actual cause and effect relationship like the first two noble truths are, the truth of origin and truth of suffering. And again, that's because cessation is permanent. And that's why we can't say it's actually caused a state of negation, a state of absence as a note. So therefore it's static. This is how we would look at them in terms of cause and effect. Look at these Four Noble Truths. So in the Abhisama Alamkara, Maitreya's ornament for clear realization, in the first chapter, we find it says Jutdemba. It says established, and then comma truths, and then says 3 jewels. But first, the word established is referring to the 2 truths implicitly, and then the next word truths is referring to the 4 noble truths and the presentation there. And in that section, we find the order of the 4 noble truths the way they are for practicing. Here in the text, going back to the Lamrim Chenmo, showing the significance of the Buddha's asserting the truth of suffering is the first of the four truths. The presentation in the first chapter of the Abhisama Alamkara of Maitreya's text is how one would actually practice it. It's the Four Noble Truths according to the stages of practice, how they would be realized. That is first the truth of suffering, and then the truth of origin. And then the truth of origin, then the truth of cessation, and then the truth of path. This is how one would realize these things, realize there is suffering, and then look for its cause, and then realize that there is cessation, and then find its pathway. So these are the stages of how one would practice. But then when we go to the fourth chapter of the Abhisama Alamkara, the Maitreya's ornament for clear realization, we find a different way of putting it, and that would be in way according to those cause and effect relationships, and putting in those types of categories. And that it says the cause, the path, suffering, and the absence or cessation. So here, this would be putting the Four Noble Truths in a different order, by putting the two causes and the two results together. So the cause is referring to the truth of origin, path referring to the truth of path, suffering referring to the truth of suffering, and cessation referring to the truth of cessation. So that would be putting the truth of origin, which is a cause causing suffering, and then the truth of path, causing or a facsimile of causing that truth of suffering. So this would be according to the stages of cause and looking at them in terms of cause and effect. So this is two ways that we can look at them, and this is first. From the first chapter is the presentation that is going to be given here. Oh yeah.
Ta doden kuyu nyeme samba tan kuyu jori samba saji ni je ta tombo doden kuyu nyeme samba dela tombo la ni doden denji Thomas on be go ba dembas ne doden gomba ngo saji ni digdoa doden denji Thomas on be ne gomba dembas doden denji Thomas on be gomba de moi do je ko tombo de marako tombo dro dans demba na nas o di ko so den do den denji Thomas on be go ba den go wares do den denji Thomas son be go ba den ko tombo la so be do den de ba de denji Thomas son be go den ba go ba yo wares go ba den ba ana do den go mo sa je ni re do 다 동부 어디 동부 사진이 주잖아. 동부 denji 도대 denji Thomas sombi goba tembatans. denji Thomas sombi goba. ane donga goba ngani je ta 동부 도대 denji Thomas sombi goba 가르스나 군주는 교당 동에네 뒤레비 임베 군주 하라 도대 쇼와 이나 지셔 존된데지 된지네 바타다 못봐 존데 된지네 바타다 못봐 그런 단된 동에 밥이 된 바고 내는 근육 밥이 된 바고 세송 세나스 도대 토마스는 그거 봐도 다 줘봐 공다 줘봐 근육 내가 동에 줘래 동에 내가 근육은 줘버래 군주 대발게 되고도 저게 대발티 쇼고 되고도 tama 대발지 준리 고릴 도데 저게 대발 혼로선데 저게 대발고 돈 군주 밥이 대발 송고 주생가르레스 저봐 말고 저봐 what 서도와
근데 에완이 the giant sheba 에완이
늘다 자지바 라린 좀 고노 사지로
오케이
도den kuyi nyeme samba dan kunyu kuyi jore samba aje tambala ni Doden Kui Nyami Samatala, Doden Denji, Thomas Kubat Yamba Saji, Dogen Gumbangu, Sajini Digdua.
So, okay.
That number Dogen Kunju, and Kunju Jotan, Kunju Daba Juro, Kunju Daba Jotan, Dogen Daba T, Debores, and Debu Yimbe, Kunju Tanhalas, and could Jotan Hell to Tanhala, Doden Shawayina, Chi Shed Joden Digit, Jundis couldn't tell the Dute, then Dogen Pabi Debo, then Kunju Pabi Debo, Karjin Sumares, Son Shenas, Sobat Gomar, what did you?
Yes, lesser. So then, reflection on suffering and its origin. We find this is explained in two parts. Reflection on the truth of suffering, the faults of cyclic existence, and then reflection on the process of cyclic existence in terms of its origin. So reflection on the truth of suffering, the faults of cyclic existence. Reflection on the truth of suffering is explained in terms of this showing the significance of the Buddha's asserting the truth of suffering as the first of the four truths, and then the actual meditation on suffering. So the first category, showing the significance of the Buddha's asserting the truth of suffering as the first of the four noble truths, begins here with a debate that takes place. And this order that's being presented here is the order that we find in the Abhisama Alamkara, the Ornament for Clear Realization by Maitreya, where it states the established truths. In that section, the order is the superior truth of suffering, superior truth of origin, superior truth of cessation, and superior truth of path, as it is presented here. Then we read the Quam that's presented. So this is where the debate starts. We're on, again, if anyone is following in English, page 269. The Quam. The true origins are the causes, and true sufferings are their effects. Why did the Bhagavan reverse that order? If the origins precede sufferings and say, monks, this is the noble truth of suffering, this is the noble truth of origin. So why would the Buddha put the superior truth of suffering and then the superior truth of origin instead of why did the Buddha present it in that order instead of showing it in terms of the cause and effect, the truth of origin and then the truth of suffering? So this is the question that's presented, and then Lama Tsongkhapa will respond to this. Again, this is, Rinpoche said, like a debate that's taking place of why they're put in this order. Then the lenja nge loma son.
That land le ni land le do den ji ni land du jin ji song an land je ba land le ka ni and the land le do den ji Thomas be the nigga se land du jin ji song then land je ba ka ni that ni ba Tombuness Gunjun Jotan, Doden T. Rebbe, Gunjun Hala, Doden Shawa Yina, Chi, Joden Deji, Jundi Twenty, Tetan, Matumba, Grunta, Dene, Dunga Pabi Dembo, and then Gunjun Pabi Dembo, she son she not Jobat Je. Tati Landele Dune Land Debatan, Land Jeva Shebani, Tela Tumbe. Junde Jirimba le dote, Tandel Roland. Tella Tumbe, Junde Jirimba le dote, Sombane, Junde Jirimba le dote, Danger son Bucorin, Tan, Brudan Debanat and Sadroa, Dote Sombane, Sombala, Nyalan Jene Chimbu Yube, Jumetos, Nyalan Nagachibuaris, Te Sosan, Junde Corin, Dote Somba in a Juyo Mares.
The Dudu, okay. So In the reply section, the Ewa Ni, the Jayan Sheba,
Janjiba did the Lari Kurun Rota, Janjiba and Rabure,
Ni,
Doden Jishini, Janjiba with the Sundua, Lando Temba the Jiba Sheba Nishi, Lando Temba the Wateresa, Tene Tela Tumbe, Tenemalando do what Lemore,
okay.
Tela Tumbe, Jundi Jimba le dote, Jundi Kurin le dote, Somba, Denji Somba Lane. Nyala jine chembo yuebi rudo deba nadan shebi kosu ne denji sumbu kurindil nyala jine ga chembo yuares nega chembo yusunsan kurindida sumbal chun yumares yuebi chume dos ne de duche
Okay. And Jeba? Okay, then you got okay. Okay, so then where this debate starts, we will present the qualm again. The true origins are the causes and true sufferings are their effects. Why then did the Bhagavan reverse that order if the origins precede sufferings and say, monks, this is the noble truth of suffering, this is the noble truth of origin. So why was the order presented in this way? So there are two parts to this reply. First, there is a summarized response, or a summary of abbreviated response, or a summary response. And then there is an expanded response, or an expanded explanation of a response. And we find very similar categories in Jayan Sheba's commentary, and that's commentary is called the interlineal notes of Jayan Sheba and then the other authors that are involved in the text. So in the interlineal notes of Jayan Sheba, we find these very similar categories of the condensed or abbreviated point and then expanded. So the abbreviated point is here. In this case, the teacher reversed the sequence of cause and effect, not out of error, but because this reversal is vital for practice. So here it's of great importance if one is practicing to have them in this order. So one is actually realizing them or practicing these pathways, they would be in this order. So it's saying it's of great importance, it's vital for practice. So this is the abbreviated point. Rimchi chutsu jipa lesson.
Oh,
The Dudu Lhasa.
Okay.
Okay, we'll take a short break. Okay.
Oh, yeah. Tado den denji Thomas Somba Soba de Landela Dudu Chi na Jeba Nidua.
Lhasa.
Land Dudu de Bardat. What the Tala Tumbe, Jundi Jemba le Dute, Somba la, Jundi Jemba le Dute, Denji Kurin Somba ne, Jotan Land, Dongetan. Kasa Rudan Demba Notan Chebi Kurin Tata Somba la, Dongan Tombo Somba Denji Somba Nyale Jine Chembu Yoris, Chembu Yobi Jume to Len Tombo Dudu Che. Tadama Geshe Rotean, Kanshena, ne maybe Jusen Kanres ne Yoris and Tibaina, Tean Kanshena the Das, Dujarani la. Toma koale tanduji shinji malubashi koale tandu shinji malubashi majina zawa chebe te tabala cheta tris tandu tabatun lo shinji malubashi mena ko tabal chitu mas kanas chegures cheta ti Tena Toma Duja Mari Maybe Dine, Duja Mashibi on Tekonanila Maribadan, Lendela Maribi did yours, maybe Dine, Kubansu Dunkiala, the ones in Lushiji Luki, Lubalas, Kubansu Dungha Yimbala, Dungha Mayimba, and the ones in waters. What they look at the there is Shinji Lugul Hubala, Jijabales, Dungan Jasun de la Ta, Dungan Jasun de la Ta, Nabakun to Yuminas, Dungan Ku Dungan Jasun de la, Tony Maduna, and then Ku Shetate, Nabakun to Yumaris, Tony Tumatuba Ina, Yumina, Shi Chun Dene, Shinwala, Sheba Chu. Ku jasun de shinwala lomala jiba garjin chigmundus jiba jene jemenjosa garjin chigmundus she somba tar dene ya tabana demba mayjes ane ku phonsu duzuga ya tabana demba mayje dunghen wares dunghen lo she dunghen jinaba toma sone ane joaji gubis dunga jinaba tumasone ane dujat lote senenga nu sambaje baje gures joaji gubi dunga daba tumasonsos what about jujana tanda tanmanduwa
and the jeba
le jeba
okay, so we have again this debate that takes place in this section of the text under the heading showing the significance of the Buddha's asserting the truth of suffering as the first of the four truths. So the qualm that's presented is the true origins are the causes and true sufferings are their effects. Why then did the Bhagavan reverse that order if the origins precede sufferings and say, monks, this is the noble truth of suffering, this is the noble truth of origin. So again, this is the presentation that we find in the Abhisama Alamkara, the order, and this is an order that one would actually practice it. So we find Abhisama Alamkara where it says established truths. In that section, this is the order that Maitreya presents for practice. So then in the response section to this qualm, there are two parts. The first is the abbreviated response, and then the next is the expanded response. So the abbreviated response is, in this case, the teacher reversed the sequence of cause and effect not out of error, but because this reversal is vital for practice. So this is of the utmost importance for actually practicing these truths. So this word vital, the Rinpoche used also of the highest importance for practice. Having them in this order of suffering and then origin is the highly important for practicing it. So then this is the abbreviated, and then it says why. So then the expanded response, why? If his disciples failed to develop a proper determination to liberate themselves from cyclic existence first, they would sever the very root of liberation. How then could he lead them to liberation? Thus, in the beginning, the darkness of ignorance enshrouded his students. They mistook the wonders of cyclic existence, which are in fact suffering, for happiness. So here it's stating that those non-superior beings, those beings who are, it says, enshrouded in this darkness of ignorance, enshrouded his students. So here, this is speaking of two different types of ignorance. There are ignorance of cause and effect, or ignorance of karma and its results, and then the ignorance of the nature of reality. There are these two types of ignorance that one could possess, and here the type of ignorance that is being shown is the ignorance that thinks that the wonders within cyclic existence, or the excellent things that one has within cyclic existence, are actually happiness. the correct view is to recognize that they are true sufferings. They are, that they are true sufferings, but that we mistake them for happiness. So it says they mistook the wonders of cyclic existence, which are in fact suffering, for happiness. So this is an ignorance that grasps. So it's an ignorance that grasps at the excellent things within cyclic existence as being forms of happiness when they really are not. So this is the ignorance, this grasping at things because you think that they are happiness. So then we find a quote from Aryadeva's 400 verses, 400 stanzas. It says, "Fool, if there is no end whatsoever to this ocean of suffering, why are you who are caught up in it not afraid?" So here Aryadeva is saying that if you have not realized emptiness yet, if you have not directly realized emptiness yet, then you are sure to be reborn. So it says, if there is no end whatsoever to this ocean of suffering, why are you who are caught up in it not afraid? So if you haven't realized emptiness, you will have to be born into cyclic existence. If that is the case, then why aren't you afraid? So if you haven't seen emptiness, why aren't you afraid? Because you are going to have to experience more of cyclic existence. This is a fact, a fact that if there is that ignorance related to the nature of reality, the ignorance of emptiness, then there will be cyclic existence, the suffering of cyclic existence. So why aren't you afraid if you haven't realized emptiness yet? And then it says, by saying, in fact, the cyclic existence is not happiness but suffering, the Buddha explained many forms of suffering and led his disciples to become disenchanted with cyclic existence and recognize it as suffering. As this is a necessary precondition, the Buddha spoke first about the truth of suffering. Khensur Rinpoche. That's so.
Dungeji jasu hunwa tune tala taba doba nas taban doba na dungeji du guba tunla teyan juma du na munduba she ne ti ju chetabu yin nyanto kunjungi tenba sheba shebe ti wud kunjungi tenba sun sos 다 동행 대바 산당 동행 산당의 동행 가부요 말이스 동행 가부면도 안에 동행의 매버줘야 그도바 용그레스 동행 매버줘라 동행 좀 매버 마주나 안 동행 매버줘도 말에 동행 주 가리나 냐베 안에 도바들 해용그레스 안에 동행 주 군유 대바래요 어때 대오도 군유 대바 손용그레스 그나 케시의 제비 나산 줘봐이나 나사들 가부요 말보다 나사데 나사 매버주야 가부요로 나사데 매버주 나사 매반 나다 매나 냐바 상바 장지 나사 매버레 도 말로 나사가 주가리메 아니 매건 진 다다데네 자지제네 아니 매사는 매버주고도 어떤다고 손대사 말바
Rinpoche Kabaka, the Puik.
Tene, dunge jasu lunga tune, tela taban doba nasa, dunge del gabuyo mara, dunge del tag doba yungres, dunge de duba tunga teya, dunge meba zoya teya, dunge juma duna, and dunge du tu mares, kensi tribila su, so jut meba mazuna, and what the dunga de mebazum Muduba Shene, Ti Jutta Chetayin, Chetabashin Chanto, Kunjungi Demba Sheba Shebe, Ti would Kunjun Son Sosa, Kunju Deba Dunga Deba Ulu, Mongu Jisen Son Marva. The den de papi de bo de kunju papi de bo ni ba son ko ju sen teres de san dang de de ga yo mare de me ba zo de ba yo re de me ba cha na ne ba san ba ta je de me ba re tu mare de ju ka ri me san ko re de ju kunju re yo re bo de kunju du ma bo na de ga bo mo do ba de yin so zang de wo de kunju de ba son yo re
Okay.
yin sa ro
Bless up.
ya
By saying, in fact, the cyclic existence is not happiness but suffering, the Buddha explained many forms of suffering and led his disciples to become disenchanted with cyclic existence and recognize it as suffering. As this is a necessary precondition, the Buddha spoke first about the truth of suffering. Then, once you recognize suffering, you see yourself as submerged in an ocean of suffering and realize that if you want to be liberated from suffering, you must counteract it. Moreover, you recognize that you cannot stop suffering unless you counteract its cause. By investigating the cause of suffering, you come to understand its true origin. Consequently, the Buddha spoke next about the truth of the origin. About the truth of the origin. So this is the reason for the order. It's how one would practice. One would first become disenchanted with cyclic existence and realizing that one doesn't like suffering. One doesn't want to have suffering. So then you begin to look for an antidote for the suffering that you don't like. So that's the reason for putting the suffering first. It's because it's what motivates you to then look for a way to abandon it. Because if you don't like it, then you'll want to get rid of it. You want to eradicate it. So if you had, for instance, cancer or tuberculosis, you wouldn't like to have that because it's a type of suffering. So you would want to get rid of it. So then you would take the necessary steps, such as going to a doctor and then taking the medicine and so forth. But you first have to recognize that you have this illness and figure out what's causing your condition in order to be able to treat it. And likewise, you first recognize that you have this suffering, and then you look for what the cause of it is, because in order to get rid of the suffering itself, what causes it has to be eradicated. So if what causes it is eradicated, then it can't be produced. So that's the reason for then this truth of origin being presented. So let me just make sure. So you develop this desire to emerge from cyclic existence because of realizing what suffering means as presented in many ways by the Buddha. So the Buddha has presented many ways that we suffer. So after we understand this, we become disenchanted with cyclic existence because we understand that it is all suffering, that the excellent things that we find to be happiness and grasp at as being happy are truth of suffering. Diksun.
Bisma. O tene kuidunge to ngalo saji leginde le nyumunginde bure nyumung tsawa danjil to dio o tene matel he do tene sa kuidunge saji le ji ba dans kuidunge ge de saji le la tene na kuidunge dio wares le jan nyumung ji ba le de do nyumung de bres nyumung ji ba ta tene nyumung ji tsawa de nyumung be tsawa de wate ne danjin shebi kunjung ge demba sheba jejin danjin ya du ne ba ton ana dungen ga bin go ba ngodo shawa yedan chayu ti wodo goden demba son gobi demba son so sa gobi demba son so de son din sare 다 그유등에 두서 갈로 사지 레진데버레 레드 녀몽데버레 녀몽 자와 단제레스 데버도 말베 는 가서 싫어니 버데 노아이에서 두서 말베다 나 데버마루바 메 데버마루바 네 최단지 데버마루바스 데버두반지 데진데 네 그유 자와레스 데버두바지 데진데 네 추나 대바 마루바 시빌로 되게 denzi nyabu dugres taba drma yembe shibilo dege taba drenzinge lol nyabu duwas what the sukna dabu yong de samarba shebe kunyu ge demba sheba jeshin dazi ya do neba tuana dazi ya do neba tuana toni dosuna dazi de pontuba de shegro ta tuana dongenga be ngoba ngodi dongenga be ngoba ngod shawa ye dan cha yue ti wudo jibal de gobe de ba sombares gobe de ba sombares
The Doni to be share yuna the dazin the understand
Doni to be share Doni to suna ne nyomu tsawa denzite ne chunu de ba de denzite ne do maru
let's okay
chansu modan gemeche shindu ba sajwe mis ne dazi mo saje gente chuna de ba maru shibe dazi de dazi sajwe res taba druma ibe shibe lo tege taba drunjing lo sajwe ba naji chuna de ba maru shibe lo tege dazi ne de dazi no sona nyomol ne de nyomol no sona nyomol de dogen ne de tengobe no goden yongres what de jebal goden son ya tres gobe de ba son os.
Then next you develop an understanding of the truth of the origin, an understanding that contaminated karma produces the suffering of cyclic existence, that afflictions produce karma, and that the conception of self is the root of the afflictions. When you see that you can eliminate the conception of self, you will vow to realize its cessation, which is also the cessation of suffering. Thus the Buddha spoke next about the truth of cessation. So if you begin to think about how the suffering that you do not want to have is produced, you'll want to figure out a way to get rid of it, and then have an get rid of it or end it. So this is the reason for then having cessation as this next step. So they're recognizing the origin of suffering, and then seeing that it is caused by something specific. So therefore, you are able to and will want to make it end. So then that's the next kind of step in the process of thinking that you would have. So then that's why cessation comes there. So karma is produced by the afflictions, and then the afflictions are produced by grasping at phenomena as being truly established. So it's necessary to apply the specific non-mistaken view to the mistaken view in order to harm or negate a mistaken view. So when we look at the example of a rope and a snake, if we believe or grasp at a rope as being a snake, the only thing that will harm the mistaken view that grasps at it as being as a snake is the non-mistaken view that realizes that it's a rope. So this is the only thing that can harm and completely negate that particular mistaken view. So in the case of the mistaken view that grasps at phenomena as being truly established, the only thing that can get rid of or negate that mistaken view is the non-mistaken view that recognizes that phenomena are not truly established, that phenomena are all empty. So it's that grasping at a true self Here it says this conception of self. That also could be translated as grasping at self. So the grasping at this self, grasping at true self, or believing that there is some true establishment, is the root of cyclic existence, because it causes the afflictions that cause then the contaminated karma, the salit karma. In the Sutra of the Heart of Transcendent Knowledge, we find the presentation of the non-mistaken view that then can be applied to the mistaken view in terms of the nature of reality. So in the Sutra of the Heart of Transcendent Knowledge, it states that there is no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, etc. And it says all phenomena are empty of nature. So what this means is that there is no truly established eye, there is no truly established ear, there is no truly established nose, there is no truly established phenomena. So in realizing there is no truly established phenomenon, one is able to get rid of the idea that there is a truly established phenomenon. So this serves to harm or negate the wrong view that we hold. So this is how applying a direct truth allows one to convert a mistaken view to a non-mistaken view. We find in the text where it states that meditation upon love and compassion, although great merit, does not strike at the core and can't get rid of the grasping at true establishment. The only thing that can get rid of the grasping at true establishment, the only real antidote for that, is the correct view that realizes things are not truly established, and that reverses that mistaken process. Okay, Dixon Rinpoche.
Dixon. Yeah, what that in ma. Tayang Zoba Jilhegdua. Ona as do they temper not doing a puppy temper, then doing a puppy temper, she doing them a temper na. Tabala. Doba Jius, Tabatua, Doba Yungres, Doba Jiu, doing a Jewuto. Gooden number resource and doing it would wooden soon have to us. They can do Subajidua, Shenas, what the Junior Maras Jumete, Tise, doing a she Gubala, Tunanhabi, Tandu Yujan, doing a Jungo Mazinchi, Judd Dunus Maton Yu, Gubango to Shaw Chato. 타바 도자 만세비시로사 어제 등에 대바된 우리 등에 먼저 돈도다지 등에시 등에 가보 매바지데 요아레데 어제 등에 주도 중앙세요 말에 쉐메데 디제 등에 쉐유 고발라 토나냐비 탄도 요장사 어제 탄도 요장 어디 가서 그래 등에 탄도 원에 들려요 말이야 가르스나 등에 중앙세요 말이야 등에 중앙세요 말이야 뭐마진지 주도 돈에서 마통유스 등에 중앙 돈에서 마통유 고방어도 샤오 냐도 타발라 토자면서 비셔로사 아제비셔 등에 우도 어디 고내 되는 지가 말이야 Mazibisharosa.
Mazibishiro. Okay. So now, so then we've arrived at the. It says Buddha next spoke about the truth of cessation, and now another debate starts. A mistaken view within a question, and then a response to negate that mistake. So the Quam, if teaching the truth of suffering promotes the desire for liberation, Should not the Buddha have taught the truth of cessation immediately after teaching the truth of suffering? And then the response is, there is no mistake. Why, at this point, after you recognize the truth of suffering, you have a desire for liberation and think, if only I could attain a cessation that relieves this suffering. But if you have not identified the cause of suffering and have not seen that you can eliminate that cause, you do not yet regard liberation as something attainable, and thus do not think, I will realize a cessation. One would not be able to go from understanding suffering directly to, from a practice point of view, directly to the cessation of it without understanding how it comes about and how that process that brings it about can be unraveled or taken apart. So without understanding those points, then one wouldn't believe that there would be a way to achieve this cessation. That's the reason that is presented here. So Lama Tsongkhapa shows that the actual suffering itself cannot be eradicated unless the cause of the suffering is eradicated, and one would understand that in understanding cause and effect, and not be able to get to a place that believes in cessation without understanding how the process of cause and effect works in terms of the truth of suffering and then the truth of origin, and how that origin can be abandoned by abandoning that grasping at true establishment and so forth. Khensur Rinpoche.
This one.
It's
타방 고방도 샤오냐도 zembanas 타방 고바데 토구느냐 토바 샤오냐도 zem바나 안에 타바도 도저히 죽가리 이나냐비 네 어디 라데데 지발레 용아르스 말베 죽가이 냐도 라제 덴바라 조베 라제 덴바 타마송소사 모든 것도 샤와 모든 것도 샤가 너바 총소나 안노 고네 토지가 라드 가리 이나냐베 너바 용고서 지발 라데데 데스 데 람바비 덴바오스 what is one thing said.
So then just reading forward, just to go backing up a little bit for content. If only I could attain a cessation that relieves this suffering, but if you have not identified the cause of suffering and have not seen that you can eliminate that cause, you do not yet regard liberation as something attainable, and thus do not think, I will realize a cessation. In this way, when you do think, I shall realize a cessation that is liberation, you become interested in the truth of the path, wondering about the path that leads to this cessation. For this reason, the Buddha spoke about the truth of path last. So one then begins to, once one realizes that a cessation is possible, then one begins to want to bring that about somehow and figure out what the steps are in order to achieve a state of cessation, achieve the state free of suffering of cyclic existence. So then it's for that reason that the Buddha put the truth of path last in the Four Noble Truths presentation according to practice. Diksun.
너가 밥이 되고 너는 근육 밥이 되고 너는 고밥 밥이 되고 너는 라 밥이 되고 대답 템발라 로지니 요아르스 롱 조제다 제비 조제 롱 조바데 땅다 조바니 나 롱 조제 주라마트레스 내내 셰자 내 주전 봉자라 데네 도자 맨네 템바샤바데 등에 주다 동고바다 대신라 셰자 봉자 Reba says, Temba says, what the long do you want us? There's a good Kurin Tata Song and Tibata, Jawshamangome, Nanny Sheja, Nanny Jun Ponjala, then the Tuja Pen and Temple Shower, Dunga Jutan Uba, the Jinla, Sheja Ponja Ribashes, Tempa Chesum Bees, Long Drum Res, or the Jeremy Long Drum Dos,
the knee, long dan dianda,
Tanga do Tiwoodre,
Dranda drew down long. Okay.
Tom Long do Dua, Long the Julhami. Jawshamang Jula, and the Sheja, what the long doji rendua. Jawshamang was on Yuares, Somba Naja, what the Deji Corin Tegres, Jang Shambi Sombe, what the long doji in the
Then a dianda.
Tentanda.
Okay, 2 channel. So then, in this way, when you do think I shall realize the cessation that is liberation, you become interested in the truth of path, wondering about the path that leads to this cessation. For this reason, the Buddha spoke about the truth of path last. In the same way, the Sublime Continuum says. So here, this is a presentation of this order by Lord Maitreya. That is a proof, when we look at categories of proof, there are scriptural proofs, and then there are correct signs, which are proofs that prove something. If one wants to prove something, prove it by way of a correct sign, or proof of by way of that it's the Buddha stated this, or Maitreya stated that. Here, this is a scriptural sign, scriptural proof. Sometimes maybe even translated as reason, scriptural reason and correct sign, reason that is a correct sign. So in the Sublime Continuum it says, recognize that you are ill, eliminate the cause of the illness, attain health, rely on a remedy. Likewise, you should recognize, eliminate, attain, and rely upon suffering, its cause, its cessation, and the path, respectively. So here is the kind of scriptural proof, and then after that, we'll then find the presentation of the proof by way of correct sign. Dixon.
What in the Daji could eat at us mobile as the long druji down, repeat druji in door. But the same, do those.
So when we look at
Julamen want to go long do those, they would down the doing those.
So in Vijayana Sheva's commentary states that it goes, it is explained in these 2 ways. First, we find the scriptural sign, scriptural proof, and then we find the correct sign proof. And it actually is in the commentary, the scriptural, and then the analysis of. And then in the analysis of, it means correct sign. So it's these 2 ways of proof, scriptural and then the correct sign proof. But again, in the commentary it says the scriptural proof and then analysis.
What did Julami long do what Julami long do those Deji Rebata Somba Tebata, Julamale, Nene Sheson Bees, long do those, Jaji water, Jeremy long do those. Ta whole matan that do resita, but the same Marabia. That but the same what in a Sheson so, Tatana, what in my repeat do resita. Tatana, Deji Teba Chuchun Gundo, Land Thomason Shins, Demba Jete. Teba Chebutan, Teba Mebatan, or the Chebu Chung, Chenrezig Samakazo, Danger Mamason Yoris, Land Thomason Shin, Koan Juba dance, Koal Jubi Judeni, Tele Dubi, Judeni Nena, Dua Shebe, Duba Yimbis, Dua Shebe, Duba Yimbis, Koal Jubi Judeni, Koal Dubi Judeni, but the water, Dua Sheba, Sanjik Dubares. Duba Yimbe Nandu Dubala, Shinto Kichins, 나도 타바 두벌 시다 개체버스 내체버스 냐내지 가동장 체위 냐내지 가동장 체위 냐술레비 내가 시다 체부도 체위 렘바다도 소마티고도 렘바다도 네 소마테네 어디 야티고레스 티고데
Lesso.
도데 상비고네 코알라 신루 네마시 메나 네 타바톤드 치장도 르 지유 근종도 졸라사 도게 상비고네 네 코알라 nganju samba koala shenlu samba juma mayba nema不是메나那我的타바 토바 de 치장을 마도 타바 돈도 오늘 레도 마레스 치장도 주의 지지 군중도 네 뢰당아 쇼박 걸로 군중대 바차는 거 노스다 군중도 졸라 군중 상비고네 그 자왈레 그저 레다 녀모바나 레버 메시나 배마토유 다페바타르 란지네나 체진 세발의 주 람마니 람마이발라 라이바 존에 냐완데베메바 주시다사 당도 거드마베 다 거데 데레미데 당도 도데 도데님이 살마베나 타바든 지심이 지신 근주 그유절에 마사나 그유자와 제주미시비 실링은 주시 때마다 코아관계 집에서 당하다 두바도 어떤 수익사 말베
So first again we have from the Sublime Continuum Maitreya's points that show the stages of the way one practices. I'm sorry, the Four Noble Truths presentation according to how one practices it. And so we find it, Lam Tsongkhapa showing that order is presented by Lord Maitreya in the Sublime Continuum. And then we find the analysis, the correct signs and reasons for it. It says, this being the case, the Four Truths are taught repeatedly throughout the Mahayana and the Hinayana. So both the vehicles, the great vehicle and the lesser vehicle. Since the Sugata has included in the Four Truths the vital points concerning the process of cyclic existence and its cessation, this teaching is crucial for achieving freedom. So all the of the Buddhists practice this, the Mahayanas, Hinayanas, the beings of small, medium, a great capacity. We find these points, the points that are presented, important to all of these capacities of practitioners. Since this synoptic outline of practice is important, it must be taught to students in just this order. Why? Unless you reflect on the truth of suffering to the point of actually becoming revolted by cyclic existence, your desire to attain liberation will be mere words, and whatever you do will lead to the origins of suffering, further suffering. Unless you reflect on the origin of suffering until you have a good understanding of the root of cyclic existence, which is karma and the afflictions, you will be like an anchor who does not see the target. You will miss the essential points of the path. You will mistake what is not a path to freedom from cyclic existence for the path and exhaust yourself without result. The Rinpoche chu kaba ka de puke. Puik de kaba ka sa.
Tal do the ribe do sa ten mamar beta na denje ne teba jujun kun to Thomas Songshi ko an juba ta du bi ne na ta ko al ju bi junde ni ko al du bi junde ne na dawa shebe Sanjik Dubares, Duba Yime, Nadu Dubal Shira Keshabares, Nyalenji, Gadun Shintuchi, Rembatatu, Tigute, Tanangani Random Riba, Duden Sambi Gune, Coalition Lu Nemashimena, Taba, Tundu Tizantun Rui, Chiji Kunjun Rolas, Duden Yemi Salamabena, Tabatun Jihimachi, what they do not remember. Dunga de Basambi Gune, Koala Shenlu, Koala Nabanju, Shenlu, Namashi, Juma Membajimena, Taba Tundu Cizon, Taba Tundu said the Cizon Madu, Taba Tundu Retu Mares, Cizon Dunju, and the Gigi Luna is Shobakolo Kunjun Chanagres, Kunjun Dulasa, Kunjun Sambi Gune. Then the Kunju Papi Dabo, Lady Kunju, the Nyomo, Kunju Sambi Gune, Kuzawa Dan, Kuzawa, Leda Nyomo, but now, Level Machina, Bema to be not Pemba Terror, Large Nena, Chijin, Sibal to Lama Imba Land Zone, no one devil member you should that Dunga de Batukunju de Batunega, the Abu Machina. And then Dogel Tantric can do some Juma Maya, but the young Marisson is at it. Kunjun Ku, Jorema Sona, Ku Tawa Jusu Meshiba, sitting in the Chushi Tambatan, Kwa Kangi Mashiba, what they do in Samarba. Kunjun Sambi Gune, Ku Tawa Leda Yomo, but now, Leber Machinas, Ku Tawa Leda Yomo, but to the Machina, Bematon, Dapemba Terror. Lange Nena Chejin, Sibali Tree, Lama Imbala Landu Zone, and then Kalejava turned up Maba Judas, Giva Drebem, Nawa, Drebemeba, Ju Shetansa, down the Jimarbe.
So this.
What about Jujana?
Are taught repeatedly throughout the Mahayana and Hinayana. Since the Sugata has included in the Four Truths the vital points concerning the process of cyclic existence and its cessation, this teaching is crucial for achieving freedom. So if one wants to achieve liberation, one has to reflect on the process of cyclic existence in terms of suffering and its origin. This teaching is crucial for achieving freedom. Since the synoptic outline of practice is important, it must be taught to students in just this order. Why? Unless you reflect on the suffering to the point of actually becoming revolted by cyclic existence, your desire to attain liberation will be mere words. So unless you reflected over and over on the downfalls of cyclic existence, then you won't actually be revolted by it. You have to think of what it actually is, what the truth is about it. And the truth about what is true about it is that it is necessarily suffering. So once you begin to really think about these drawbacks and begin to understand this, then you will be revolted by cyclic existence. Until then, it says your desire to attain liberation will be mere words. So there's not an actual desire to emerge. There isn't a real renunciation there, because renunciation is brought about by looking at the drawbacks of cyclic existence. And if you haven't looked at those drawbacks, then you will not be able to be liberated from it, because you won't then won't be motivated to do the things necessary to end it. And then unless you reflect on the truth of suffering to the point of actually becoming revolted by cyclic existence, your desire to attain liberation will be mere words. And whatever you do will lead to origins of further suffering. Unless you reflect on the origin of suffering until you have a good understanding of the root of cyclic existence, which is karma and the afflictions, you will be like an anchor who does not see the target. You will miss the essential points of the path. So if you don't understand that, what is the root of cyclic existence? The root of cyclic existence is the karma and the afflictions. Then if you don't recognize that, then you won't recognize that those are what have to be gotten rid of. So then when we find what the real root is, it's that grasping at a true establishment. But if one isn't able to see what causes the karma, what causes the afflictions, then one will miss the point. It says, unless you reflect on the origin of suffering until you have a good understanding of the root of cyclic existence, which is karma and the afflictions, you will be like an anchor who does not see the target. Archer, not an anchor. That makes a lot more sense. Like an archer who does not see the target, you will miss the essential points of the path. You will mistake what is a path, not a path to freedom from cyclic existence, for the path, and exhaust yourself without a result. So you won't be able to have the result you want, which is liberation. You will exhaust yourself doing many things because of missing the point, because of not understanding that it is this that's causing that. That this suffering of cyclic existence is caused by something very specific and is gotten rid of in a very specific way. So you waste your time by misunderstanding this. It is those afflictions that drive our actions of our body, speech, and mind that bring about this negativity. And we find the same point again in the abbreviated stages of the path. It says, if you do not make an effort to think about true sufferings and their drawbacks, you will not properly develop a keen interest to work for liberation. And then here we find in this expanded explanation the same exact thing stated. Unless you reflect on the truth of suffering, then your desire to attain liberation will be mere words. If you do not think about true sufferings and their drawbacks, you will not properly develop a keen interest to work for liberation. It will be just mere words. So we would, if we're combining the text, and then it says, if you do not consider the stages whereby true sufferings of all suffering place and keep you in cyclic existence, you will not know the means for cutting the root of this vicious cycle. And then, unless you reflect on the origin of suffering until you have a good understanding of the root of cyclic existence, which is karma and afflictions, you will be like an archer who does not see the target. You won't know the means for cutting the root of cyclic existence. An archer that's missing his or her target. So that's how you would look at these two texts together and see the same point being made. Therefore, you should cherish exuding total disgust and renunciation of such existence, while knowing which factors bind you to its wheel. So knowing what the origins of suffering are, knowing what the root of cyclic existence is, and then developing a desire to definitely emerge from it. So these are the points that are made here in this expanded, or the analysis of it. Rinpoche, choosing up a lesson.
다 등에도 군주 마시나 뜻이 타바야 ngömbesin 등에도 군주 데바데 앞 마시나 등에도 군주시 타바데 야버시가 말했어. 등에야 타바 등에야 롱바상 세비시로 어때 사지 산도와.
Finally, if you fail to understand the need to eliminate suffering and its origin, you will also fail to recognize the liberation that provides relief from suffering and its origin. Hence, your interest in liberation will be a mere conceit. So that ends that section. And that'll end class. We'll go to the concluding mandala offering and dedication prayer. To Chenrezig Rinpoche, Sheda Selpagu.
Maron Lujan Jiabdu
Matsu Sheda Pentogu. The fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the four continents, the sun and the moon. I imagine this is a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure realm. I dedicate whatever virtues I have collected for the benefit of the teachings and of all sentient beings, and in particular for the essential teachings of Venerable Lobsang Tenzin to shine forever. I send forth this jeweled mandala to you, precious Guru. I dedicate all this virtue to emulate the knowledge of the hero Manjushri and likewise Samatavada as well. Whatever dedication is praised as supreme by all the conquerors who traverse the 3 times, I also dedicate all my roots and virtues for the sake of auspicious deeds. In that pure land surrounded by snowy mountains, you are the source of all benefit and happiness, all powerful Avalokiteshvara, Tenzin Yatso. May you stay until samsara's end. We pray for the long life of the precious Khensur Rinpoche, the holder of scriptural and realizational doctrines, the spiritual friend trained extensively in the 5 great philosophical texts with exceptional wisdom and perseverance. Tuji Rinpoche Gutsi Shabi Derolam.
도저도저야